Before we start the video, I want you to subscribe to the best Telegram channel at the first link in the description, where we show our earnings on cryptocurrencies, and not only. Our capital that we manage is more than $3 million. Thanks for subscribing. Also in the description is a links to verified exchangers when you register, on which you get a welcome bonus from me. Let's get to the video. Such a thing as a pandemic has been completely off the news agenda lately, and cases of infection have dropped to almost zero compared to the peak. And vaccines were invented a long time ago. But unfortunately, we are now seeing this ruthless virus return to where it all started, namely China. To date, more than 30,000 new infections have already been reported. And given how dense the population in China is, namely more than 1 billion people, the disease tends to spread quickly. Because of this, the Republic's government has decided to make maximum tightening in the form of separate camps for the sick, barricading doors, and catching residents who do not have vaccination certificates. These harsh restrictions have led to protests across the country, from Beijing to Shanghai. After all, the new lockdown prevents people from moving around the city in peace, much less going to work. But while initially the protests were aimed at lifting the lockdown, they have now gradually turned into rallies against the government and the replacement of the head of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping. Because of the protest, officials are slowly loosening the lockdown in major cities. But after that, new outbreaks begin to occur even more frequently. And now, China is on the verge of going back to the days when there were so many deaths. So, in today's video, we break it down. What's going on in China? What are the main reasons for the protests? Why are Apple's stocks down 13%? And how will the new virus wave affect the cryptocurrency market? Hello, everyone, you're on the channel Cryptanic. When all these protests started in China, we didn't pay much attention to it, and we didn't plan to record a separate video. We just published a post on this topic in our Telegram channel, to which I advise you to subscribe. After all, they're only the most actual events from the world of crypto, on which you can make money. But with the way the events in China began to unfold, we couldn't help but discuss what was happening. After all, every day the situation is getting more and more heated. And at the moment, there is no change in the positive side. So, before you watch the video, please like it, because only your support affects the release of new videos. And here we go. Last week the crypto market did not please us with news. On the contrary, those violent protests in China grabbed all the news headlines when the world found out that China has actually kept people under strict quarantine for the last 3 months. To give you a clear picture of this event, let me tell you step by step how it all started and where it could lead. Let's start with the main question people are asking. Why did these protests begin? Did the quarantine measures that were already in place in China for the past 3 years lead to such chaos? In fact, the protests were sparked by a deadly fire in the city of Urumqi on November 24. The fire killed at least 10 people and injured 9. People's negativity was triggered by a video that went viral on the internet. After all, it clearly shows how isolation measures in the form of fences and barricades prevented firefighters from extinguishing the fire and saving the victims. The city of Urumqi had been in isolation for more than 100 days. Residents could not leave the region and were forced to stay at home. And, in the aftermath, public anger quickly gained momentum. Numerous videos showed people marching to the government building in Urumqi on the night of Nov. 25, demanding an end to the Friday night lockdown. The next morning, local authorities said they would lift the lockdown in stages, but did not provide a clear timeline. The attempt to eliminate the demonstrations was not successful, and the protests began to spread rapidly beyond Urumqi. After that, residents of cities across China took to the streets. With each passing day, the cities where the protests began grew larger and larger. Since Saturday, some 23 demonstrations have been counted in 17 Chinese cities. On Saturday, in Shanghai, hundreds of people gathered on Urumqi Road to commemorate the victims of the fire. In doing so, many of the people held a white sheet which represents a symbol of protest against China's harsh censorship. By Sunday evening, mass demonstrations had spread to Beijing, Zhengzhou, Guangzhou and Wuhan, where thousands of residents called not only for an end to quarantine restrictions but, more remarkably, for political freedoms. Residents of some forbidden areas broke down barricades and took to the streets. Protests also took place on the campuses of Peking University and other universities. In Hong Kong, dozens of people gathered in the downtown area for a rally. Some again held blank sheets of paper and flowers in memory of those killed in the Urumqi fire. It is worth noting that some of the protests were fairly peaceful, while others degenerated into fights, scuffles, and large-scale showdowns with the police. In Shanghai, one protester said that on the night of November 26, police detained 80 to 110 people who were released 24 hours later after officers naturally collected fingerprints and retinas. Unfortunately, because of China's strict censorship, it is impossible to verify the number of detained protesters, and it isn't clear how many people remain in custody. However, at a briefing by the State Council on Tuesday, health officials acknowledged the disruption caused by the quarantine, saying that a long lockdown could cause anxiety and life difficulties. Mi Feng, China's health official, said that quarantine policies are being adjusted, including lifting the restrictions in the near future to reduce the inconvenience to citizens. And, by the way, it's worth noting that these statements triggered a rise in crypto after a brief correction. Significant growth, more than 7%, was marked by Ripple, as well as Linkcoin. If you ask who managed to earn on it, I'll tell you, Cryptanic subscribers. In fact, they got analytics in time, opened deals, and in a couple of days fixed their profit. The subscription allows to receive the qualitative, professional analysis of the market from analysts of Cryptanic who daily will give you the information for earnings in the crypto market. If you do not want to spend extra time on market analysis but you simply want to earn, you can read more about subscription at the link in the description. So go ahead and earn together with Cryptanic. Pockets of resistance persisted during the week. On Wednesday, Guangzhou protesters clashed violently with police, and video showed people simply destroying tents where people are getting tests. And the next day, residents in Beijing and other cities broke down metal barriers blocking exits from buildings. China sent additional police to key protest sites to suppress the rallies. In Shanghai, huge barricades were erected to prevent people from crowding the sidewalks, and police officers checked citizens' cell phones in the street and on subway trains. It is no secret that public protests, very rare in China, where the Communist Party has tightened its grip on citizens' lives as much as possible, launch a radical repression of other political views, and built high-tech surveillance, with mass surveillance. Although protests occur in China, they rarely happen on this scale or prevent such a direct target against the central government. And it has a very strong impact on the country, and because China, as much as possible, controls the information that goes online, two foreign reporters were briefly detained. A BBC journalist was arrested in Shanghai Sunday night, and a BBC spokesman said he was beaten and kicked by police while covering the protests. But he has since been released. In recent days, demonstrations in solidarity with protesters in China have been held around the world, including in Britain, Canada, Australia, USA, and Malaysia. Foreign officials and organizations have also expressed support for the protesters and criticized Beijing's policies. As you can imagine, for China, the important issue is not only the repeal of lockdown, but also the outspoken opinion of the people for Xi Jinping to finally step down. And, given China's strict censorship rules, they have already begun to seek out and round up people who have expressed their views on the republic's government. Beijing, for example, told of receiving phone calls from authorities asking about participation in rallies. One protester told CNN that he received a call Wednesday from a police officer who said his cell phone signal had been found near the protest site 3 days ago. According to a recording of the phone call, the protester denied being near the scene that night. But the officer was persistent and asked how the phone ended up at the protest site. There are many such cases reported across the country, and in the near future, China will actively seek out and most likely punish protesters who are critical of the government. Nevertheless, the Republic's government is taking the first steps in easing quarantine measures. Several cities have quickly eased restrictions. On Friday, the Beijing government lifted rules set just 10 days ago that required residents to show a negative test from the previous 48 hours in order to board public transportation in the capital. Cities such as Tianjin and Chengdu did the same. But with the relaxation of quarantine measures, new cases of infection began to increase and already number almost 40,000 patients in a week, making China not in the best of situations and risking once again to feel all the negative effects of the virus. Thus, Xi Jinping has simply backed himself into a corner where he is surrounded by disgruntled citizens and the high threat of a new pandemic. This issue could have been avoided if China were not the second largest economy in the world. After all, any restrictions led to a shutdown of production, at the expense of which China earns its bread. For example, back in early November, at one of the largest plants for the assembly of iPhones, workers in a mass panic, due to an outbreak of a virus, were leaving the plant, which was blocked to quarantine. Then authorities imposed a 7-day quarantine in Jiangsu, where the Foxconn plant is located. As a consequence, production was suspended, and this led to the factory not delivering 30% of the new iPhone 14 because they simply were not assembled, and putting parts in the box for customers to assemble with their own hands is not the best option. Amid this news, Apple stock has lost about 13% in a week, and also about 7% since the protests began. After all, China is where everyone's favorite iPhones are assembled. The crypto market, of course, reacted less strongly. From the 24th to the end of the month, Bitcoin lost about 5%, reaching its support level. But throughout the week, it traded near its resistance line. Over the weekend, there were no particular advances or solutions to the issue of China. But the situation is still gradually heating up, because there are concerns about the ineffectiveness of Chinese vaccines compared to foreign variants, which the government has refused to import. And, as of last Friday, there were more than 5 deaths and 331,000 cases with symptoms in China. So, this week, President Xi Jinping will have to pick himself up and deal with all these serious problems, on which the fate of China, as well as other countries that cooperate with him, will directly depend. After all, if new outbreaks only increase, it will lead to unfortunate consequences. How Xi Jinping will act this week will certainly have an impact on the market, including cryptocurrency. So before you decide to buy any coins or open trades, keep that in mind. And we will be following the news from China and beyond on a daily basis. And the most important things will be provided for you in our Telegram channel, so be sure to subscribe. Thank you very much to those who watched the video to the end. Support it with a like and write your opinion in the comments. What could be the consequences of such unpleasant events in China? See you in the next video. Bye.